There's a specific kind of pain that doesn't come from a wound. It comes from someone looking at your wound and laughing. My name is Serena. And for most of my adult life, I wore long sleeves, not because I was cold, but because I was hiding the scars that ran from my left wrist to just below my elbow. Silver white lines, faded with time, but never fully gone, the kind of marks that tell a story you never planned on sharing with strangers. I got them when I was 22. A car accident on a rainy Tuesday morning that nobody warned me about. I survived, barely. The surgeon said I was lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I felt like a girl who had been stitched back together with someone else's thread. But I healed, slowly, quietly, and I built a life I was proud of. I joined the military at 25, not out of desperation, but out of purpose. I wanted to be useful. I wanted to be strong. And for 8 years I was. I served 2 overseas deployments, earned 3 commendations, and rose to the rank of lieutenant commander before medical circumstances brought me home. By the time I left active service, I had learned something important. Scars are not shameful. They are proof. But not everyone believed that. Her name was Vivian Hartwell. She was the new wife of my commanding officer's son, a woman who had never worn a uniform a day in her life, but carried herself like she had won every war ever fought. She was beautiful in that sharp, calculating way, the kind of beautiful that cuts. We met at a formal military dinner, a fundraiser for veterans, the kind of event where medals gleam under chandelier light and old soldiers shake hands with tearful pride. I wore a sleeveless gown that night, navy blue, simple, elegant. For the first time in years, I had chosen not to hide. I remember standing near the drink table, laughing softly with a colleague when I felt eyes on me. I turned. Vivian was staring at my arm, not with curiosity, not with compassion, with something else entirely. She leaned toward the woman beside her and whispered, loud enough for me to hear, "Good God, did she not think to cover those up? Some of us are trying to enjoy our evening." The woman beside her giggled, and just like that, the room felt smaller. My champagne glass felt heavier, and something deep inside me, and something I had spent years carefully rebuilding, cracked just slightly at the edges. But I smiled, because I had learned long ago that the most powerful thing a woman can do in a room full of cruelty is refuse to shatter visibly. What I didn't know that night was that the evening was far from over. The weeks that followed that dinner were difficult in a way I hadn't expected. I thought I was past the point where other people's words could reach me. I thought the uniform, the deployments, the years of discipline had built walls thick enough. But Vivian's whisper had found a crack I didn't even know existed. I started wearing sleeves again, and that quietly broke my heart. But Vivian wasn't done. She had decided, for reasons I still don't fully understand, that I was a target. Perhaps it was because I carried myself with a confidence she couldn't purchase. Perhaps it was because the men in that room respected me in a way they simply didn't respect her. Whatever the reason, she made it her quiet mission to diminish me. At the next social gathering, she brought it up again, openly, in front of a group of officers' spouses and donors. "Oh, Serena," she said with a smile sweet enough to rot, "I heard you were quite the soldier. Though I have to say, with those arms, you look more like a cautionary tale than a hero." The table went silent. I felt every eye on me, some pitying, some waiting. I set down my fork. I looked at her directly, and I said very calmly, "You should be careful about what you mock, Vivian. You don't always know the weight of what you're carrying." She laughed. Her friends laughed. And I excused myself from the table with my dignity completely intact and my chest completely hollow. That night, I went home and I cried, not from weakness, from exhaustion, because there is a particular kind of tired that comes from constantly having to defend your existence to people who are never worth your explanation. I almost let it go. I almost told myself she wasn't worth another thought. But then a friend sent me a screenshot Vivian had taken to a private social group, a circle of military wives and socialites, and had posted about me. She had described my scars in mocking detail. She had called me damaged goods. She had implied that women like me, broken, scarred, emotionally complicated, had no place in the polished world of military social circles. The post had over 40 responses. Most of them were laughing. Something shifted in me that night. Not rage, something quieter, something colder, something that felt less like fire and more like clarity. I didn't want to fight her. I wanted her to understand exactly who she had chosen to mock. And so I made one phone call. Not to a lawyer, not to a journalist, not to anyone with loud public power. I called Admiral Raymond Calloway, a man who had served beside me in my second deployment, a man who had once carried me 300 meters through hostile terrain when my leg gave out, a man who had cried at my commendation ceremony and told me I was the bravest officer he had ever had the honor of commanding. I told him what had happened. He was quiet for a long moment, and then he said, "Leave it with me, Serena." 3 days later, Vivian's husband received an invitation, a formal recognition dinner hosted by the Admiral himself, honoring officers whose service had shaped the character of the entire branch. It was a prestigious event, the kind that gets written about, the kind that people remember. And my name was at the top of the list. Vivian came, of course. She came draped in silk and certainty, completely unaware of what the evening held. I watched her from across the room as Admiral Calloway took the podium. He spoke for nearly 10 minutes about sacrifice, about the kind of courage that doesn't make headlines, about the men and women who returned from service carrying visible and invisible wounds, and who deserved nothing but reverence from every person lucky enough to share a country with them. And then he said my name. He told the room about the accident before my service. He told them I had enlisted anyway, with scarred arms and an unbroken spirit. He told them about the operation in my second deployment, where I had shielded 2 younger soldiers from shrapnel, taking additional injuries so they could make it home whole. He told them that the scars on my arm were not a cautionary tale. They are, he said, his voice steady and full, a decoration that no medal can replace. The room gave a standing ovation. I did not look at Vivian during the applause. I didn't need to. But afterwards, someone told me she had gone pale, that she had left before dessert, that she had been very, very quiet on the drive home. Her husband, I later learned, had a long and serious conversation with her that night about respect, about the company she kept online, about the kind of woman he had believed he married. I don't know what became of their marriage. That was never my concern. What I know is this. I wore sleeveless again to that dinner. And I have worn sleeveless every single day since. Because Vivian taught me something, even in her cruelty. She taught me that I had briefly given someone else the power to make me hide. And that was the only part of that entire story I was ashamed of. Not my scars. Never my scars. If you are carrying something visible that the world has told you to be ashamed of, please hear me when I say this. The right people will always see the story behind the mark. And the wrong people will eventually be standing in a room watching the world honor what they mocked. Time is patient. Truth is louder. And dignity, real dignity, always finds its moment.